بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد. We started Ramadan looking at the Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu anhum ajma'een, and the Sahaba to the Ummah are very important. And one of the chief reasons cited, the main reason, is that they are our bridge to deen. We gain our deen, our understanding of Quran, of Hadith, etc. from the Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu anhum ajma'een. We also discussed that there is a hierarchy in the Sahaba Kiram, starting off with the four Khulafa who we have been looking at for the past few days. Then also the Ashara Mubashara, the ones who accepted Islam early, the one who made Hijrah, the ones who participated in Badr, in Hudaybiyah, those who accepted Islam before the conquest of Mecca, and those who accepted Islam after the conquest of Mecca. So there is a hierarchy. And even Allah in the Quran also mentions that لا يستوي منكم من أنفق من قبل الفتح وقاتل, that those of you who spent in the path of Allah and who did jihad before Fath Makkah and those who did it after, you cannot be equal. La yastawi. So there is a hierarchy amongst the Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu anhum ajma'een. More recently we've been looking at Ali radiyallahu anhu, and yesterday we concluded with the fact that when Ali radiyallahu anhu was martyred, this was, and also prior to that we had Siffin, the battle of Siffin. This was the starting point. The battle of Siffin was the starting point where you had the group called Khawarij emerging, who declared Ali radiyallahu anhu to be in the wrong and Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu to be in the wrong. And they are the ones who were at the forefront of the assassination of Ali radiyallahu anhu, and they tried to assassinate the other two, Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu and his chief negotiator Amr bin As radiyallahu anhu, but they escaped. They were lucky. They only had minor injuries, one of them, and the other one escaped. So this was the emergence of Khawarij, who were actual supporters of Ali radiyallahu anhu originally. This is also the starting point of the Shias. They might not have called themselves Shias on that occasion, but as time went by, those who were in full support of Ali radiyallahu anhu, they declared themselves and formalized themselves into a group known as the Shias. And there are some fundamental differences between the Shias and the Sunnis, which Sunnis is generally ourselves. Why are we known as Sunnis? Because after Quran we take the Sunnah. Our religious authority is first the Quran, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the word of Allah. After that we take the prophetic traditions, the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and everything else comes afterwards. Everything else comes afterwards. Fundamental difference is that for the Shias, after the Quran, it is basically one of their imams. They have a religious hierarchy, and they say that our first imam, the first imam of the Shias, is none other than, obviously, Ali radiyallahu anhu. He is the first imam. After him, it's his son Hassan radiyallahu anhu. Remember, we discussed that he was Khalifa for a short time after Ali radiyallahu anhu's demise, for around 6 months. Then he saw that this is going to lead to more bloodshed. There's so much rivalry. The Banu Umayyah are vying for the position of Khilafah. There's my supporters as well. It is best I resign, I abdicate, and I hand over Khilafah to Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu. And we also looked at the hadith. I'm just saying this again because it's important to understand the context. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying that Khilafah in my ummah will be for 30 years, i.e. Khilafa ala minhajin nubuwa, on the style of prophethood, 30 years. After that it will be kingship. So from Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu onwards, there is basically kingship, kingdom, mulk, and it became largely hereditary, that from father to son, etc. So biggest fundamental difference between us and Shias is that obviously we accept Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu an, and Umar, Uthman and Ali in that particular order, in the order of Khilafah. For them it is Ali radiyallahu anhu is first. Ali radiyallahu anhu is first. And again, within the Shias there's levels of extremism. Some say that Khilafah was stolen from him. There are also those Shias who subscribe to this belief, quite a majority of them in fact. And some others, go to the another extreme, where they basically curse and slander various Sahaba. Remember what we've been discussing for the last 2-3 days. When you had the standoff in Jamal, in the Battle of the Camel, who do you have on one side? Aisha radiyallahu anha. Who else do you have? Zubair bin Awwam radiyallahu anha. Who else do you have? Talha radiyallahu anha. Both from Ashara Mubashara. Who do you have on the other side? Ali radiyallahu anha. And other Sahaba. So for the Ummah, for Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, for us, what stance have we adopted? When it comes to that word, who remembers the word Mushajaratul Sahaba? We remain neutral. We can discuss things from a historical perspective, but we don't say this side is right or this side is wrong. Even if our heart is inclined towards one side, the other side, they made an ijtihadi error. They made an error, and when a person does ijtihad, even if you err, you are rewarded. You are rewarded for that effort of ijtihad. So some Sahaba's ijtihad was this side, I want to stay on this side. Some Sahaba's ijtihad was, no, I want to stay with Ali radiyallahu an because he is the Khalifa. He has been appointed as the Khalifa. He has more right. I'm going to stay on his side. So when it comes to the Shias, they say Ali radiyallahu anhu is our first Imam. Then his son Hassan radiyallahu an. Then his son Hussein. And then from Hussein radiyallahu anhu's progeny, from his children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, all the other Imams, they emerge. And they have 12 Imams. This, chain of Imams, it finishes at the 12th Imam, whose name is Muhammad Mahdi or Ibn Mahdi. And they say he is the Mahdi who will come at the end of time. So when he was alive, obviously because of political issues, he went into hiding. And they say he is still today in hiding. And he is the promised Imam Mahdi at the end of time. That's a separate issue. But the main thing to understand here is that for the Shias, basically, there is a hierarchy. And the issue of Imam, and then you have Ali, Hassan, Hussein, and from Hussein radiyallahu anhu onwards, his son Zainul Abidin, very famous. Then you have Muhammad al-Baqir, Ja'far al-Sadiq, etc. And what you've got to appreciate here is, which is so important, that us Sunnis, we also hold all of these names I've mentioned in high regard, because many of them are tabi'een. Many of them are tabu'ut tabi'een. So they are important people in our eyes as well. Yes, we don't have the same belief that they are Imams one after the other. That's something where we stop. Like Ali radiyallahu anhu. We revere him, we respect him, we love him. He is from the Ahlul Bayt, the cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the son-in-law of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a senior Sahabi. So many of his manaqib have been mentioned by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. However, we also have that balance as well. So that's why we discussed the other day that one group out of the despisement of Ali radiyallahu anhu, what we call Bughz Ali, that's Khawarij. Another group, another extreme, Hubbi Ali, the Shias, they went on another extreme. We adopt the middle path. The Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the Sunni Muslims, we adopt the middle path. Just to conclude today on one other point, if you remember from Uthman radiyallahu anhu's time, we discussed towards the latter part of his Khilafah, trouble started. trouble started to brew. And if you remember, before that we also discussed about Umar radiyallahu anhu. How was Umar radiyallahu anhu described by Hudhayfa radiyallahu anhu? That you are the door that keeps fitnas away. When you are not there, the fitan, they will start coming one after the other. One after the other. So when Uthman radiyallahu anhu was assassinated, from that point onwards, this is something slightly different now. From that point onwards, when somebody would narrate a hadith, people started to ask for reference. Prior to that, if a sahabi said, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and then a tabi'i heard and a tabi'i was narrating. If a sahabi is narrating, there is no issue, because as-sahabatu kulluhum udul. We accept all the sahaba to be honest, upright, just, especially when it comes to narrating prophetic traditions. There is no question of them falsely attributing anything to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when the tabi'in, tabu'ut tabi'in would narrate a hadith after the assassination of Uthman radiyallahu anh, people will ask and say, what is your source? Who did you hear this from? So this issue of sanad, chains of transmission of hadith, it started from this point, and there's a reason. Why did people started to demand formal proof, evidence? Who did you hear it of? Were there any witnesses, etc.? When Hazrat Uthman radiyallahu anhu was martyred, obviously you had what we call now a political split. You had Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu on one side, Ali radiyallahu anhu on one side, then you had a breakaway group of Khawarij. There was basically turmoil. And a lot of these groups, they were formed on the basis sometimes of tribal loyalty, like the Banu Umayyah. Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu's supporters largely were the Banu Umayyah. So some people in each group, the ones who are a little bit overexcited sometimes, they started to fabricate hadith in favor of their particular school of thought, their ideology, their stance in these mushajarat. They actually started to forge hadith. Now you're going to say that's really wrong. It's a sin. It is. Man kadhaba alayya muta'ammidan falyatabawwa maq'adahu minan nar. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam very clearly said that whoever falsely attributes anything to me, he should make his abode in hellfire. So they started to fabricate hadith to support their political viewpoints, their ideology. And to them, they weren't doing anything wrong. They felt, we're doing this for the greater good. We're doing this to stop fitna. We're doing this to stop civil war. So they felt we're not doing anything wrong, although they were doing something very grossly wrong. So because from both sides, and this is not something sanctioned by Ali radiyallahu anhu or Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu. These are the foot soldiers. These are the foot soldiers. And if you want to understand this, I always give the example of Tabligh, the Tablighi split. Okay? The foot soldiers, when the Tablighi split first happened in the UK, 2017, 2018, you should have seen social media. The foot soldiers from both sides, ye wo post kar raha hai, ye wo post kar raha hai, ya Allah. It's the foot soldiers. You can't control the foot soldiers, basically. The people on the ground. So on both sides, the foot soldiers, they started to fabricate hadith, make up hadith. So because of that, people now started to formally demand sanad, verification. So if a tabi'i or tabu'ut tabi'i came with a hadith, straight away he will be asked, who did you hear it of? Was it a sahabi? Was it another tabi'i? Okay, and if it was another tabi'i, who did he hear it of? So the system of sanad, it started from this time. And as time went on, this system became even more stronger, even more stringent. And to put things into a little perspective, we hear again and again that after the Quran, Sahih Bukhari holds the highest rank. It holds the highest rank. Why? What's the reason? It's given the title Asahul Kutub Ba'da Kitabillah. the most authentic of books after the Quran? It's because Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, you got to understand, by the time Imam Bukhari rahimahullah is born, I think he was born in 194 or 196 AH, he's coming a long time after the Khulafai Rashideen, a long time after the Sahaba. He did not see any Sahaba or Tabi'een. He would have seen a few Tab'ut Tabi'een. So by the time he comes, between him and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is a gap of around 150, 60 years, maybe even more, a huge gap. So Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, whenever he accepted a hadith from anyone, he would make sure he checked the source properly. Who did he hear it of? Who did they hear it of? And remember, the person who he heard it of, he was no longer a Tab'ut Tabi'een. This is now after the time of Tab'ut Tabi'een. So, call it a normal person, just for easy, understanding. He would make sure first his source, he would verify his teacher basically. He would verify his teacher's teacher. And then he would verify his teacher's teacher's teacher, who could have been a Tabi'i or Tab'ut Tabi'i, going back up to the Sahabi. There is no need to verify the Sahabi. As-sahabatu kulluhum udul. It's up to before the Sahabi, you need verification. So he made sure that in his book, every hadith he checked the chain of transmission thoroughly, very carefully. Is there any person inside there who might have been a potential liar, or even accused of lying, or even he might not be a liar or accused of lying, but there's another issue, his retention, what we call in Arabic dhabt. Was there an issue with his accuracy, his retention? If there was an issue, he would not, obviously if it comes to lies, he would run. He would not accept that. Even when it came to memory and dhabt and accuracy, he would not accept. He would not accept. He made sure the chain of transmission, all the narrators, they met the criteria 100%. 100%. That's what gives Bukhari its sterling status. The chain of transmission is solid. Nobody can question his chain of transmission. Now I'll just give you another small example. Sometimes Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he might have wanted a certain hadith to put inside his book to highlight a certain point. What you've got to understand is, Bukhari is not just a book of hadith. Bukhari is basically Imam Bukhari's madhab, what he believed in. That's why his chapter headings, people have written books on his chapter headings. When he establishes a chapter heading, he's making a statement. He's actually making a statement. He's telling you what his stance is on a particular issue. It's not just a passive chapter heading basically. So sometimes Imam Bukhari rahimahullah wanted a hadith, but he couldn't put it inside his book because maybe in the chain of transmission there is one person who might have had an issue, like his level of accuracy, memory, has been questioned. So he can't accept that hadith because obviously straight away it's going to affect the authenticity of his book. So what he does is, he doesn't put it inside his book, but he mentions it in the chapter heading. He mentions it in the chapter heading, basically. You could call it like, it's like a clever way of bypassing this issue of authenticity. Because remember, it's the hadith in his book that matter. They've got to be 100% accurate in terms of the chain of transmission. So he puts it inside the chapter heading. And that's why there's a debate that those ahadith which he mentions inside his chapter headings, what is basically their level? Where do we stand with those ahadith? The conclusion is that Imam Bukhari, even if he puts something in his chapter heading, it will have some basis, some foundation. And there is a famous scholar called Imam Ibn Hajar. You must have heard of his name, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah. He wasn't a scholar of 1,000 years ago. He was around 500-600 years ago. 500-600 years in history is nothing. He's a very recent scholar. And mashallah, Allah took so much work of him that before him there's Imam Suyuti rahimahullah. These two people, scholars of recent times, there is no subject where they have not written something on that subject. Like Ibn Hajar, I'll give you an example. His most famous book, what we call the magnum opus, is Fathul Bari, which is the Shara of Bukhari. And that's why there's a famous slogan, La hijrata ba'da al-fath. La hijrata ba'da al-fath. Fath here is not Fath Makkah. That there is no need for any hijrah. You don't need to go anywhere after Fathul Bari. Once he wrote Fathul Bari, this is like, that's it. This is the best commentary and the best shara you can ever get on Sahih Bukhari, basically. So, and he's wrote books on every subject. Like, I just told you, chain of transmission, verification was demanded from around the time of Uthman radiyallahu anhu, his assassination. So obviously you need to know about narrators. This narrator, that narrator, when were they born, when did they die, who were their teachers, what was their character like, and all sorts of things. Who were their teachers, who were their main students. You need that information. All this information was gathered in books. Those books are known as Asma'ur Rijal. Asma here means biography. Biography of Rijal, not men, of narrators. Asma'ur Rijal. Ibn Hajar has written 5 huge books on Asma'ul Rijal. Just imagine, Fathul Bari, let's forget that for a moment. Huge book on the commentary of Bukhari. He's wrote 5 books just on Asma'ul Rijal, and each one is like 10 volumes, 12 volumes, basically. So I'll give you an example. He's got one book on just the Sahaba, their biography. Just the Sahaba, all the Sahaba who narrate, as many as he could find. Now just think to yourself, in those times there were no computers, there was no Google, and today we have AI. Ajkal anything we go straight to AI. Yeah, somebody on our group posted a couple of weeks ago, when Ramadan started, they put down, is it possible for the UK to start Ramadan on this particular date? And AI gave the answer. So when the group even AI knows when Ramzan and Eid is. Okay, obviously it was not with Saudi. AI capacity to aqal hai. Anyway, that's another issue. So basically, they had nothing at their disposal, nothing. And just think to yourself, what they wrote. If somebody today just wrote one book, 12 volumes or 10 volumes, ya Allah, it will be an achievement, wallahi. They wrote several books like that. So one book he wrote is called Taghliq al-Ta'liq. غلق يغلق التقليق وغلقت الأبواب وقالت هيت لك. Come on, Farook, what does that mean? To lock. Farook is an Arabic student. He used to learn Arabic with me many years ago. Many years ago. Kitna varas the gaya se? 25, maybe even more. But then he's advanced since then. Okay, he's even been critical of me as well. That was very harsh. Anyway, تغليق التعليق. Taghliq means to lock. Ta'liq refers to the chapter headings of Imam Bukhari. Basically, Ibn Hajar has boxed off the chapter headings of Imam Bukhari, and he's given you, if he's mentioned a hadith in the chapter heading, Ibn Hajar has gone back, found the hadith, found the source, commented on it, commented on the chain of transmission, and given it a ranking. Is it Sahih? Is it Hasan? What rank does it have, basically? So even his chapter headings, basically, they might contain certain ahadith which doesn't meet his stringent criteria of his book, but even then there is a basis, a foundation, which someone like Ibn Hajar, who came after, how many years, 200, so you've got like after 500-700 years, he comes after Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, and he writes this book. It's in 5 volumes. It's in 5 volumes, and he boxes off basically all these issues. People might have raised questions in the past about Imam Bukhari's this chapter heading, that chapter heading, or he's got this hadith inside there. Where is the source? Because remember, in the chapter heading, he doesn't put down the chain of transmission. There's no time, there's no space. But Imam Bukhari putting it there, it's proof and evidence that there must be some basis, there must be some foundation. He's not going to spoil his book just because of a chapter heading. So conclusion today is 2 things, basically. There is a fundamental difference between us and the Shias. This difference started off politically, and then with the political difference, that who will rule, who should be the Khalifa, it also spilled over into what we call theological difference. The theological differences probably, took shape as time went on, and the group then called itself Shias. They then had their system of imams. So, Ali radiallahu anhu never said in his lifetime, I am the first imam. Hassan radiallahu anhu, his son, never said, I am the second imam. Neither did Hussein radiallahu anhu. This is something they established as part of their creed, as part of their madhab, their faith and their beliefs basically. So we have a fundamental difference with them. Tomorrow, inshallah, what I want to discuss is the current situation in Iran. The current situation in Iran, that where do we stand? Where do we stand? Because I'll just finish off with this. On one side, you've got basically the Zionist entity, okay, which is obviously hell-bent on finishing off everybody in the Middle East. They couldn't care less whether you are Shia or Sunni. At the same time, the one who's been attacked, Iran, they are largely Shias. 90% of the country is Shia. And also in Shias, there's different categories. I haven't got time to go into that today. Maybe tomorrow we will mention it. Most of them are what we call the 12 Shias, i.e. 12 Imams, what I said, the 12 Imams. Where do we stand in terms of the current conflict? And there's ulama on both sides. There's ulama on both sides who have given statements, very strong statements. So we need to appreciate that what should our stance be? Because we are Muslims. The media doesn't say, when you have the BBC and the news and the Guardian and the Telegraph and all this, they don't put down, they don't differentiate. Hang on guys, these are Shias, right? They're not the Sunnis. They just label everybody as Muslim. We're included inside there, basically. May Allah give us the ability to act upon what has been said, and also to tread in the footsteps of the